Hi, I'm Shiva. Welcome to Channel 8 News. Recent news in London. Britain's new coalition government of Conservative and Liberal Democrats unveiled on Wednesday the most ambitious plan in recent years to turn over the overly centralized and often intrusive way the nation is governed. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg outlined this proposition. He wants to reduce the increase in nanny state laws, which are state policies regarding protectionism, economic interventionism, and regulation that have come to dominate Britain during the Labour Party's 13 years in power. The coalition believes that these nanny state laws have restrained individual freedoms and expanded state powers to an alarming degree. The coalition also vows to rid Britain of the nationwide system of identity cards and the government's right to intercept and hold personal internet and email traffic from citizens with no criminal record. Reports also note that Clegg wants to reduce the number of closed-circuit cameras in public places. He believes that these cameras have little effect in hindering crimes, and he feels that the cameras encroach on the rights of law-abiding citizens. Additionally, the plan proposed by the coalition of Conservatives and Liberal Democrats would create a fully elected House of Lords, eliminating hereditary and political favor as a guaranteed route to power. In the new system, the candidates would have to gain a simple majority of the vote in their respective constituencies in order to secure the election. This new plan also adopts recalls, an important political vehicle for voicing the opinions of the masses. With this policy of recalls, voters can unseat unfavorable lawmakers by gathering 10,000 signatures on a petition. Clegg will also allow local governments to have more controls over schools, hospitals, police forces, and items of the nature in order to reduce the centralized government. Overall, Clegg believes that during the Labour Party's control, the government has become too centralized. He even noted the government as one of the most centralized governments in Europe. Clegg and supporters believe that during the past 200 years, a British Prime Minister backed by a parliamentary majority wields immense powers without a formal written constitution. We will, however, have to wait and see if this proposition furthers, as it is met with quite a bit of opposition from the critics. Now over to Joe for some domestic news.
Thank you, Shiva. 5 students in Live Oak High School in Morgan Hill, California, were asked to leave school for displaying their patriotism by wearing American flag t-shirts and bandanas. The problem? It was Cinco de Mayo, the day that has celebrated the history and culture of Mexico since Mexico's unlikely victory over France in the Battle of Puebla in 1862. This display was considered by the vice principal to be racially motivated and likely to cause conflict. Although the boys have not been punished, they were forced to leave school to avoid suspension. Superintendent Wesley Smith has stated that the school's vice principal was wrong to punish the boys, but the community is not entirely in agreement. In a meeting at the school meant to relieve some of the racial tension due to the incident, heated arguments both for and against the students' actions, as well as those of the administration, were presented. American flags were seen throughout the crowd, which also included many representatives of the large local Mexican-American population. Janine Crofts' impassioned speech asserted the view that the American flag represents all Americans, since, as she said, nobody is here that didn't come from someplace else. A counter to her came from student Teresa Corona, who said that the district cannot sugarcoat this. She believes that disregard for another culture is a problem that should be stopped now. Although the meeting was a cathartic release for a tense situation, there is still significant disagreement over the future of the students, district, and community at large. The students' families have stated that they attained legal counsel, but are not sure if they will pursue legal action. Now back to you, Shiva.
Welcome to the local news portion of our broadcast. Today we're interviewing the New Albany High School College Counselor, Mr. Jeffrey Stallman. First question. Do you agree with the opinion that it was one of the most difficult years for college applicants?
I would say it's not much of an opinion. I think it's fact at this point. There's no question that this was easily the toughest year of any year for college admissions. And if you go back even 10 years, if you go back and look at Yale as an example, 10 years ago they admitted 18% of the applicants who applied to Yale. This year that number was right around 7%, which is far lower than it's ever been before. And last year was maybe 7.5 to 8%, so it's decreased a little bit just in recent times. But even over a 10-year spot, that's an enormous drop. And so that's something that we've seen, and that's kind of across the board. This was definitely the toughest year. They think that that's because the number of applicants is higher this year. This is kind of the high watermark of students graduating in a single year. and more kids are going to college, and more kids are applying to some very selective schools. So the combination of all those things has made this definitely the toughest year on record.
You noted earlier that the financial situation across the country affects college decisions and things of that nature. Could you please touch on that for a second?
Yeah. I would say that two things happened with financial issues affecting colleges this year. Number one, at least at New Albany, I think this is pretty true across the country. We saw probably fewer students who are going to private schools versus state-supported schools this year. So that's something that I think we're seeing, and that seems fairly clear. We've had more students this year, I think, even than last year, who kind of came down to a monetary decision on where they were going to go to college. The second thing is, and I think that early decision made a big difference this year, and I think that a lot of it had to do with money. I think a lot of kids who could afford to might have applied early decision in certain schools, and that helped them get into those schools because of that. Other students who might have come down to a couple of schools in Ohio State, for instance, often ended up choosing Ohio State because of the cost factor more than anything else. But that's kind of how I saw it this year.
How do you feel about the admissions and the applicant records for this year's New Albany applicants?
This is a really exceptional class. The strength of this year's class is certainly as strong as we've ever had before, and it's right there. We had a great class last year, and this class is right there with it. So, while we're a little disappointed, maybe some of the schools that are the hardest to get into in the country, the Princetons and the Stanfords and the Yales and that kind of thing, overall I think the class did terrific. I felt like there were a lot of really good things. We had 3 students admitted to the University of California at Berkeley, and we've never had any student ever admitted to that school before. So that's kind of a bellwether of this as well.
What do you think were the strengths and the weaknesses of this year's pool of applicants from New Albany High School?
I would say the strengths were just overall academic excellence. I think the students had just incredible strength in their applications. The students tested great. They were exceptional academic students at the school. Probably one of the main reasons we didn't have students get into some of those schools as much as possible is we didn't have students with hooks this year. We didn't have, sometimes athletes will have an advantage in those situations and other types of students. That's probably the biggest thing that didn't work, but the students are great. The quality of the applicants is great. This is a terrific class.
What do you think you've learned specifically from this year's applicants from New Albany High School?
I would just say that I think that next year's class, one thing we'll probably talk a lot about is that if they're really interested in maybe some selective schools, they really will have to think about early decision. That seems to be a trend that continues, and that's something that unfortunately is something they'll have to consider. I also think that as we go through each year, we kind of get an idea of where the scholarship money is coming from, and there are certain schools that seem to be doing really well for scholarship money, and others that are not. So that will help us kind of help some of those students who need scholarship money focus on that next year as well.
What are your specific hopes for next year's pool of applicants?
My only hope is that they find great college fits. Honestly, that's I don't care about how selective the schools are or any of that kind of stuff. My only concern is that we find students. We find places that they're happy at, that they're successful at, that are really good fits for them. That's my primary concern. So I've met with about 2/3 of the juniors so far this year, and hope to meet with a few more before the end of the school year. But I think we're on the right track with many of them.
And what advice for the seniors going off to college next year do you have?
Oh, let's see here. I would just hope that they will get involved at the school they go to. That's my main concern, is that they go and they obviously have a great time and they're successful academically and all those things. But I hope that they're able to involve themselves in their school community when they go off. I think that would be a really important thing to focus in on and to look forward to.
Thank you a lot, Mr. Solomon.
You're welcome.
It's been a great year.
Good.